I'm Seamus Collins. I'm from Velipy. We're a project management training provider, and we're certified by the PMI. And also, I'd like to thank Grania there and the Business Excellence SkillNet for the opportunity to speak with you today. And also, I suppose, to thank her for setting all this up, etc., and making it available. So, what I said I would talk about today was, what is project management really, and how does it benefit you and your organization? Now, I know there's quite a lot of us on the call, so I want to, I suppose, we'll take maybe questions maybe at the end, and I've also put in here to the slides my contact details and Grania's contact details as well. So if there's something you don't want to ask here on the call, you can reach out to Grania as the network manager, or you can come back via me as well. Now, can everyone hear me? No, there's somebody. I think there's some people still maybe struggling a little bit.
Seamus, I can hear you.
Most people can hear me. Okay, let's crack on. So now, the recording will be made available as well. So if somebody can't hear me, I'll make the recording available to you after, and you'll be able to get this from Grania at the SkillNet. Now, where I want to start, I suppose, is that because there is a lot of us on the call, we probably can't have the usual level of interaction we might normally have. So what I will do is maybe take questions at the end, as I said, but if someone has something as we go along, just unmute yourself there, or feel free to raise a comment, and I'll get to those questions at the end as well. Okay, so you have our contact details. We have an hour, so let's try and make the most of the time we have here together this morning. Now, the first thing I suppose maybe to start with, or to start thinking about, is, a lot of people talk about project management, and this is here from the the industry growth forecast, is that project management is big business, and the amount of project management roles is growing. And I suppose what you see on the ground is that more and more companies are projectizing their work, and they're using project management as a way of getting things done. So there's a huge growth in the area. And I suspect even in your own companies, even when you're advertising a role, very often people say, yeah, I think it would be good if they had some project management type experience as well. Or no, they want more than that. They want them to have program management experience, or they want them to have some sort of certifications in it. So it is a growth area, and more companies, as I said, are using and seeing the benefits of project management. But that's the good news. But we can see here then that there's a huge amount of waste. So for every $10 spent, over $1 is wasted. And a lot of this is down to, poor project management, and, not making the right, decisions on projects, and using the right project management tools and techniques. So not only do we need more project managers, we actually need better ones, right? And some people, you meet them all the time, they're doing project management, and you might say to them, have you ever, been trained in any formal methods? And they go, no. And again, that probably, when they see the formal methodology, they go, oh yeah, those certain things I was not quite right on there. I can see now how maybe certain things were not quite being successful. But then you meet some people, and they have it, maybe they haven't been on a course, but they seem to have naturally, developed some great project management skills. But it is a growth area. And now when we think about it, I just put together this slide here as to, why would you want, project management, and why would you want to develop that capability in your organization? And there's 3 bullets there, and there's some other, the main benefits spelt out on the right-hand side. But the big one we would see for a lot of people is that we have a standard way, a consistent way of doing projects. And a lot of people, when they come and they talk about project management, they go, well, we have a common language. And a lot of your groups, they work in geographically dispersed teams, different cultural backgrounds, etc. So giving people a common language, is a huge benefit to the organization. Everyone then is using the same approach. And what we get into then is that if you're a service-based organization, that, to a bigger company, that if that company is getting the same experience from you as a service provider, regardless of who they deal with in the organization. So they start to say, okay, standard approach is good, but then the second bullet, we want to ensure that the methodology is best in class. So, leading on from the last slide where we're saying money is being lost and money is being wasted, well, maybe if there are best practices, tools and techniques, we should be using it, because a lot of our projects are already restricted or constrained by budget or schedule. So we need to make the best use of that we can and get every ounce of value out of it. And I suppose the last one then is a very important one as well, is that some years back, you would often visit a company, and I've been part of them myself, where we'd go, they have a technical ladder, they have a management ladder, but there was project managers kind of falling somewhere in between and didn't know where they sat actually. Were they part of the technical team? Were they on the management ladder? And more and more companies that have embraced project management have a project management type ladder. And then at least that we have a progression, we have a pipeline of talent developing that can do bigger and bigger projects. And then in the event that we lose someone senior, that we have someone that is a follower that can take up that and lift the new project and carry it forward. You also see companies using this as a way of assisting the onboarding. Now, again, often when we talk to companies, we'd say, how long is it before someone is of benefit when you hired them? And very often people say, 6 months, 9 months, a year, whatever. So given the amount of churn that happens in the market, that's a long time. So at least if you have or are using some internationally accepted best practice and the person you're bringing in understands that methodology, well, then you're getting them up to speed far, far quicker. And I know from my own experience in the past that the money I made on some projects is long gone, but the knowledge I gained or what I was trained in stayed with me. So a lot of companies use this as a kind of a way of, I suppose, creating that stickiness with an employee, to create that sense of loyalty and also to hold on that sense of development of staff. So again, you start to see the benefits of, having, project management as a capability or as a, ladder in your organization. If I move on, this is what the PMI, the Project Management Institute, and we'll talk about this later on in the session, where I want to talk to you about, these in a little bit more detail and explain where they're at. But if you think about any project, these are what we call the knowledge areas around the edge here. And you can say that, even if I wanted to, change my car or renovate the attic or put in a new production line or develop a new product, there is a scope. Every project, there's a scope of work that needs to be done. And then once I know the scope, I can start to develop a timeline. And then once I know the scope and the timeline, I can start to develop a budget. How much money do we need? We start to think about what quality standard are we trying to achieve? And then what people, equipment and materials do we need? What are the resources? We start to think, okay, communication, who should I be talking to? What will my progress reporting look like? Is it going to be daily, weekly, monthly? Is it going to be face-to-face? Is it webinars? How do I communicate? Risk, what can go wrong? What is my mitigation? What is my contingency plans? Procurement, more and more of your organizations outsource work. So you don't do all the work yourself. You might take a certain part of the scope and outsource it to a third party. And stakeholders then is who's involved or impacted by this project and how do we manage them? Not all of them might be for the project. We might have some resistant stakeholders. And the concept then of integration is pulling all these pieces together into an overall plan. And I think when people see this, they go, oh, that makes sense to me. And again, if I talk to companies and I'd say to them, send me your plan for a project, if we were reviewing it or helping them or doing something with them, you'd say to them, where's the plan? And very often all they'll send you is a Gantt chart. They'll say, that's the plan. And I'd say, no, that's just the schedule. What about the budget? What about the risks? What about the stakeholder management plan? What about the comms plan? Where are the resources coming from? Are you sure you really understand the scope? So you start to think here, if I had all these parts of the plan, I would have a plan. And then you see the inner circle here, and you go, well, what is this? Now, again, to explain this, in a nutshell, I could say, well, keep it very simple. Projects are initiated. So a project comes from somewhere. Someone has a business case, someone has an idea, and we start to think, okay, let's charter this project and let's start developing a plan. And then when I plan it, I'm basically coming up with a plan for all of these. So I'm stretching the initial idea into what is the real scope here? What is the timeline? What is the budget? And then once I have a plan, I can start to execute that plan. And as we do work, we want to try and stick to the plan. So we've got the concept of corrective, preventative actions, but you've also the concept of forecasting based on what now has been done and what money has been spent. Where do we think this is going to go? And that might help senior management then make a decision on whether the business case is still there or not. So we start to think, okay, well then project management is really useful to me because it can help me initially to come up with the plan. It can help me then execute the plan, and it can help me then avoid some costs, as in, trying to keep on pushing in a certain direction when we know we're going in the wrong way, or it will take too long, it will cost too much. And eventually we get to the idea of closing out and handing over to operations. And that's what we start to think about when we think about projects. What are all these different areas of the project? And what are the best practices, tools, and techniques to help us scope, schedule, budget, risk? All these areas have best practices, tools, and techniques. And if you have projects, well, then it would be good if you knew some of these, because your resources are scarce and you need to make use of them. Okay? So hopefully you're getting the feel now for what project management is and how it could benefit your organization. One thing I really like is this simple slide. Now, again, we're talking about how would project management benefit you and your organization. Now, this is a very simple view of a strategy, right? And every company has a vision. A vision is, where do we want to be? Mission, how are we going to get there? And then underneath that, every company has organizational objectives they are trying to reach. And these objectives, obviously, then we achieve objectives using the portfolio of work that we have ongoing. And within that portfolio, we have projects and programs and operations. So as you start to understand this, you go, okay, every project has an objective. And that objective, by achieving it, is driving the organization to achieve its vision. Now, just as a brief exercise there for you, just think about your own company for a second and go, what is the vision of your company? Now, in class, many times you'll ask people, what is the vision? And they go, can't think of it. It's a big, long thing. It's confusing. It's whatever. But the good vision statements, you could have a vision at a program level. You could have a vision at a divisional level. But what you're checking for is my project strategically aligned with where the organization is going? So you understand that concept of the bigger picture and how your project fits into that. And when you start thinking about initiating these projects, that's one of the first things we would check for is it strategically aligned with where we're trying to go as an organization? And that's a really important question to ask at the start of the project, because if you're trying to get support from senior management, well, you want to understand where they see the company going, what's the vision, and then you justify how your project fits into this. Now, some projects obviously come from top down. We have the organization has a vision, they come up with the projects, they push them down into the organization to complete them. However, in some organizations, there is bottom up. People on the ground are thinking of projects. And that's fine, as long as the projects that they're dreaming up are checked for strategic alignment. Now, if you have written down the vision and you know your vision, well, then you should be thinking about your project and how that fits in the overall scheme of things, okay? And then it's you see that bigger picture straight away and get that connection. And again, project management will help you make that connection between your objective and the overall vision of the company, okay? Now, the next part of this is really, as I said earlier, many of us work in geographically dispersed teams. The challenge then is, of course, that not everyone has English maybe as a first language. And even if English is your first language, you may have a slightly different meaning for a word than what your other stakeholders have. And that results then in confusion on projects. Now, I know when I left college first myself and I joined the company, the boss said to me one day, he said, what are the risks? And I remember there was a risk of a fire at a plant. And he said, send me the mitigation plans for the fire. Now, it's a bit of confusion about the words because I was new to project management and to projects. Instead of sending him the mitigation, I sent him contingency plans. And I remember he's never forget his email back, and his email back was, "Are you just going to let it burn, Seamus?" And I was going, okay, hang on a second, I've mixed up, basic terms here. And then the other stakeholders think, you don't know what you're talking about. Now, all I'd like you to do there now, again, and as I said, I won't ask questions or call people out or unmute them, but just write down, what do you think the meaning of the word risk is? What do you think the meaning of the word quality is? What do you think the meaning of the word stakeholder is? What do you think the meaning of the word critical path is? So just take those 4 words there on the right-hand side of the slide and just write down, what is the critical path? What is risk? What is quality? Who is a stakeholder? And I'll give you the definitions, and very often people go, Jesus, yeah, I've been slightly off in my interpretation of that. So we take risk for a start. Risk, we could say, oh yeah, everyone knows what risk is. It's something that can go wrong. But from a project management point of view, if I looked up risk in a dictionary, it would say, yeah, things that can go wrong. But from a project management point of view, we have 2 sides to risk. We have threat and we have opportunity. So it's double-edged. What can go wrong, but also what can go right? How can I make maybe something, instead of preventing something going slower or costing me more, how do I get it to go faster and cost me less? So what's the upside here I should be on the lookout for? Quality. What is quality? Now, many of you are from medical device or regulated backgrounds, and you'd often say to people, what is quality? And they go, oh, come on, Seamus, everyone knows what quality is. Yet when you drill down, they struggle to give you a straight answer. But the real answer is, they say quality is fitness for use, or quality is a conformance to a requirement. But whose requirements? The stakeholders, or maybe in some cases, in your cases, it could be the FDA or whoever is a stakeholder on your project. So what you're up to really is, as you start to think about project management, you have to be very careful of the meaning of words. So a stakeholder is anyone involved in a project or impacted by the project, or perceive themselves to be involved or impacted by. And what we see in project management is that a lot of projects don't fail because we get the scope wrong or the schedule wrong or the budget wrong. It's often because we do not manage the stakeholders, or we assume that every stakeholder is going to be for the project. And what we'll talk about maybe later on in the session is not every stakeholder is for the project. Some of them will resist the project. They might not say it out straight, but they are resistant to it. Some of them will come out straight and say, I'm totally against this. They might be risk averse. Well, how do you get them to move from their position to supporting the project? And again, that's the skill. Critical path. Every one of your companies probably uses that term, or maybe you have a senior manager using the term critical path. Critical path, we will see, is the longest path through the schedule. It's the shortest time in which the project can be done. Why would I want to know the critical path? Because if I know the longest path, well then I need to look at compression of that critical path. And it also means if there's any slip on the critical path, the project end date will not be met. Okay? So again, as we start to think about the benefits of project management, a lot of people will say the biggest benefit in some cases is I have all my team talking the same language. I will have no misunderstanding about the meaning of words. I will have everyone thinking, talking, doing it the same way, and I will get efficiency and effectiveness from that. Okay? So let's briefly move on. Now, again, this is just to be maybe a somewhat provocative, but you will have people in companies that will say, Seamus, we built the pyramids without the PMI. We do not need project management. What we need is more engineers and more operators. We do not need project management. We see project management as an overhead. And the pushback is maybe, have a think about this yourselves and go, what's the difference between the projects your company are doing today and the pyramids? So just take 5-10 seconds there yourself and think, why do we need project management? I've given you a lot of benefits, but this now is trying to provoke you and get you to think about it and go, we built the pyramids without the PMI. What's different today? And if you think about it, if I go back just one or two slides here to this map, you get your answers from here. The first thing is your projects are on a way tighter timelines. Okay, you could have taken years to build pyramids. Now we have to shorter timelines, pressure on to get a product to a market, pressure on to get a production line up quick, etc. But the big advantage some of those earlier projects have is they have lots of resources. They have lots of resources and they're not paying them. And that gives everyone an advantage. And if you thought about that, if you said, well, in our company, you've got lots of projects. If I could get extra resources, well, then I'd be sorted, maybe in some cases. And again, if I didn't have to have costs involved, well, then I could do more and more projects. The other thing is some of the earlier projects would take certain risk. Okay? In your case, you're probably do not take risks. And we have stakeholders involved. Okay, we have contractors involved. We have to pay them. Resources, people have, I don't know, EU working time legislation. We can't work more than X hours a week over any number of weeks. So we're starting to think then that projects today are different. We have a pressure on resource, we have pressure on risk, we have the FDA looking over our shoulder, or the IMB, or Health and Safety Authority. We have lots of stakeholders involved. And we start to think then, project management is needed to get use and efficiency and effectiveness out of the scarce resource we have. So if I then took a simple definition here from the PMI, all I'm saying here is a project is a piece of work that needs to be done. We're saying it's temporary. Now, I don't care if it's 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, but projects have a beginning and an end, okay? Operations, though, are ongoing. They're repetitive, okay? So we're trying to create a unique product or service. And I push it then, and sometimes when I'm talking to organizations, I would say to them, you have projects here in your company and you have operations. Which one is more important? And it always gets a good laugh. People go, Seamus, operations are way more important. And I go, yeah, okay, fair enough. Operations make you money today. But projects bring us new products and services that we need to get into the operation, and they future-proof us. So they're essential to the growth and survival of the organization. Now, I admit I have nothing against leaning out processes and operational excellence, and all those things are needed. All of those things, though, and anything you do in an operation, that will make you competitive. It will not give you competitive advantage. Okay, and that's where you're going to try and produce these new products, these new services, etc., to try and get something new to the client to either retain your current market share or maybe to try and grow it. Okay, so again, start to think about that and go, okay, yeah, I see that, yeah, operations are good, they make us money, but they won't keep on making us money unless we refresh that constantly. So then we start to think, well, that means projects constantly change that organization or change that operation that we're doing. And you see the most successful companies, they are very good at bringing projects, using projects and project management to bring new products or services to their customer base to help them grow it or maintain it. And again, we talked then about project management being the management of those changes. And that's why as part of project management, we have the idea of stakeholder management, right? Stakeholder management is a huge part of it because some stakeholders will resist that change. But it's your job as a project manager, not just to produce the new product or service, but to try and get the operators, the business to go with you on that journey. So we start to think then is that project management is we have knowledge, we have tools and techniques that we can apply, and that will help us meet these project requirements. Okay, so hopefully now starting to fall into place for you as to the benefits of project management in an organization. Now, this is a slide I like, and it helps people in class. We've talked about, competing demands about scope, schedule, cost, quality, risk. We need to try and reconcile them into an overall holistic plan. But we keep thinking as well about, this functional boundaries. And in many of your organizations, there are different departments involved. They may be, as I said, virtual. They may not be co-located. And we want to try and use project management as a way to get all those teams working together. But the big thing again is, do stakeholder needs differ? And if you think about even your current project, you could have a project at the moment that is, I don't know, to automate a step in a production line. You might say, this is a great project, it's going to save us money, everyone should be for this. But if you write down all the stakeholders, you might go, there's you, there's your boss, there's the company, there's the production manager, there's the operators, there's the equipment provider, etc., etc. But maybe the operators do not want this project because they might lose their jobs. Maybe the production manager does not want this project because they're thinking, my army is going to be smaller as a result of this. So sometimes you get this, not sometimes, a lot of the time you get this, is that stakeholders are people involved or impacted by the project. And if they see it negatively impacting them, even though it could positively impact the organization, they will resist that change. So again, we need to start thinking about how we manage those stakeholders and how project management can help us with a tool set to, I suppose, get over or overcome that resistance. But then I want you to answer this question here. What is project management, and what is project management? How will it give us success, or what is project success? And I would like you to just, if you have a blank piece of paper there beside you, just go, what is the difference between project success and project management success? So project success versus project management success. Is there a difference? And maybe this is the simple answer that I would give you at this point, is that some companies, I would say, they might go, well, we have project management success. We delivered on time, we hit all the milestones, we delivered on budget, we got the quality standard to the required level. And I'd say to them, and did you sell any of the product? And they go, no. Well, then, was the project a success? And you could argue, no, the project wasn't a success. So there's a balance here to be struck between project management success should bring about project success. But your senior managers are looking for project success first and foremost. They want the benefits. And that's why, again, the language here is important, and project management will give us that language, or this common language. Sometimes in projects, we are focused on the deliverable. However, your senior management or your senior sponsors or stakeholders, they are focused on benefits. So if I decided to you, I said, I'm going to put a toll gate in the Jack Lynch tunnel, my deliverable might be the physical toll gates, etc. The benefit, though, is maybe the revenue we collect. So if I'm talking to a senior manager, I need to be constantly reminding them of the benefits. And if I'm a project manager, I need to make sure that we don't lose sight of the benefit we set out to achieve. Now, these benefits, when you talk to people about them, the business wants benefit. And that benefit can be financial, it could be non-financial, it could be tangible, it could be intangible. So very often people think, oh, the project has to bring us tangible financial benefits. And you go, well, fair enough. But sometimes there are benefits that are intangible. And sometimes there are benefits that are non-financial. And they, in some cases, might be equally important to the senior stakeholders. So you might go, we're designing a new product, we're going to sell X amount of it. Well, that's a tangible financial benefit. However, maybe there's IP or a patent or something that comes out of it. I can't quite put a value on it. It's intangible, but it is of value to us as an organization, maybe to protect our space in the market. So again, the project management will give you that language and give you that tool set so you can talk to senior management and also help your team make sure they do not forget the benefits as they produce the deliverables. Okay, so onwards we go. Now, this is a classic example then, I suppose, of, if we think about this project here, was this project a success? So if we think about the Volkswagen emissions, one could argue that at the time, the project team were put under pressure to get the car to pass the test. So at the time, you could say the project and the project management of it was a success. However, over time, you could say, well, they achieved the result maybe through the wrong means. Well, then now you say, actually, we've done brand damage, we have reputational damage, etc. maybe it wasn't such a success after all. And that's what we got to be thinking about, and again, more and more of your companies are getting concerned about, the ethics around projects and the ethics around business. And also, I suppose, a lot of your companies would be very concerned about sustainability and damage to the planet. And in the past, a lot of companies would have talked about the bottom line and, what's the bottom line in terms of profit. But now people are starting to think more and more about what we call the triple bottom line, is in it's not just about profit, it's about people and planet as well. So again, when you're laying out your project plan at the start, how do you factor the triple bottom line, for the want of a better word, into your project plan and make sure it aligns with the company values, etc., so you do not cause any damage to your company in the longer term. Okay. Now, this is the exercise for you. All I want you to do now is think about the projects that you have been involved in yourself. Some of you have been in industry a while, and just go, why did they fail? Why don't we deliver on time, on budget? Why do we keep on getting them wrong? So just write down yourself there, why do projects fail in our company? We're one of the most educated workforces of all times, yet we struggle with projects. So just write down, what are the reasons projects fail in your organization? Okay, so just take a moment. Now, I suspect as you started to write down words, some of the words we've used already this morning will have started to come up. You might have said, some sort of generic term, poor planning. You might have said lack of stakeholder engagement. You might have said poor risk management. You might have said optimistic estimates. You might have said lack of resources. And all of those are causes of project failure. And then when you start to think about project management, well, project management will address each one of those causes and start to give you best practices, tools, and techniques so you do not make those mistakes again. But the number one reason from research, apparently according to the research, why do projects fail? Very often projects fail, they say, because we have lack of clarity on the objectives and the benefits. So we're not clear on what we're doing and why we're doing it. And again, if you think about that, and you'd often hear, again, some of our senior managers, and we're guilty of it, you'd go to a project meeting and a senior manager might stand up and go, I think we all know why we're here. You go, no. They might go, well, it's obvious the benefits that will bring. And definitely, if you are a senior manager, I think you need to say, guys, look, this is why we're here. This is what we're doing. I'm expecting this production line in place by this date. That is the objective. And the benefits I'm expecting to get are X, Y, and Z out of this. So at least if we have clarity on those as we set off, that will help us build out our plan for the project. And it will also stop people in terms of the scope creep and everything else. You go, no, the objective here was this. It wasn't this, right? And you start to pull people back to that core objective. The number two reason for project failure very often is senior management support or lack of senior management support. And you might go, well, why wouldn't you have senior management support? And sometimes we don't have senior management support because our project isn't strategically aligned. The number three reason we'd say very often is lack of integration. And lack of integration is you're not joining the dots up, right? You're making decisions about scope without considering the time, the cost, the quality, the risk, etc. You're making decisions about, some part of that model without thinking out the bigger picture or fully thinking it through. So then we're going to have project failure. You agree to an increase in scope, you don't have the people, you didn't get more budget, you didn't get more time, so then maybe the quality goes down. So you start to think about it like that and go, yeah, project management would help me avoid things like that, okay? So again, whatever you wrote down is probably a valid answer, but those usually pop up as the three main causes. So just very briefly here for the last, just want to give you a feeling for what's under each one of these circles here. And that will give you a kind of an insight into what are we talking about beneath the surface here. So if you're thinking about scoping out a project and you want to use best practices, tools, and techniques, according to the PMI or according to any best practice, they're saying Well, first thing anyway, to define the scope of any project, we should find out what the stakeholders want. So what are the requirements? And once I know the requirements, I can define the scope. I'm going to say what's in scope and what's out of scope. What are my assumptions? What are my constraints? And then once I have what's in scope, I'm definitely going to draw something called a work breakdown structure. And this work breakdown structure, takes the big blocks of work, the deliverables, and breaks them down into what we call work packages. And again, once people start to see this, they go, God, there's more to this than we thought. And this WBS can feed then into the schedule, the budget, the resourcing, the risk, etc., etc. But it resets senior management expectation as well, because sometimes when you show a senior manager the WBS, they do go, whoa, there's more to this than I thought. And that's a good thing to say, actually, yeah, you asked me to put in this production line, but this is the scope of work that's needed here. Sooner or later, well, fair enough, I have build up my scope. I need to control the scope and prevent scope creep. And scope creep is that unintentional movement. But if I have a well-defined scope, well, then it's hard for the scope to creep, because I know exactly what we're supposed to do, and any variance or deviation from that can be easily identified. But there's a concept here called validate scope. And validate scope is when I have to go back to the client with my whatever I've built. So they've asked me for something, I've gone off and I've produced a deliverable, and now I need to go back to them and get them to accept it, okay? So sometimes this is where I suppose the challenge lays, is that a customer might have given you a requirement, you've manifested it in a deliverable, but the way you've actually put it together, maybe there's been some misinterpretation or misunderstanding as to how it would have come out. And it's when the client sees it, they go, oh yeah, I didn't mean it like that. So again, by good scoping and understanding how we came to this point, we can give you best practices about how you overcome those problems and etc. Once I have my scope, then we start thinking about timeline and saying, how long will this take? And again, if you think about it, you have your scope all broken down. So now I'm trying to take the scope and nearly turn it sideways and start to link up these work packages. Now, in some cases, you might break the work down further into activities that I can track. Once I know the activities, I'm going to lay them out in a sequence, left to right like this, and understand the order in which work will be done. And then the big challenge for most companies is, what are the estimates? How long will each work package take, or how long will each activity take? And again, there's best practices, tools, and techniques that I can share that we say, this is how long something will take. And once I know this, I can develop my schedule. And if that schedule is beyond what the boss is expecting, well then, at least we go, well, what needs to go? Do we need more money? Do we need more resources? But what if the work is duration driven and it's not effort driven? Well, then maybe no amount of money is going to shorten that. Maybe we need to go back now and take something out of the scope. So project management now, tools and techniques are helping us reconcile the scope and the time. The big challenge in here we find in class is people are okay breaking down the work. They're okay laying it out left to right in a sequence, in a network diagram. But where we struggle most is in estimation, where people are too optimistic. They maybe don't allow for multitasking on other activities. They give you an estimate based on effort, but they don't really factor that into a duration of when it will be done. And they don't allow maybe for things going wrong. They make certain assumptions. They're optimistic about things going right the first time. And then once I have all of this, I can build up a critical path and understand then, and when I go to the boss saying, I need X, and they want to give you resources, you go, well, those resources you're giving me are not on the critical path, so it can't help me shorten this project. Okay, so again, a huge amount in that module of scheduling, but again, it benefits even team members, etc. If you give a person a work package, they should be able to break it down, lay it out, and tell you when the work will be done. Okay, cost. How much will it cost? And again, when you think about projects involve people, equipment, materials, etc. And your boss might have a certain picture of what the project should cost. But when you build it off the work breakdown structure, you start to think then about, well, this is what it will cost. And if you also start to factor in the schedule into this, many of your companies have fiscal year limitations. You have to spend the money in particular quarters. So at least then if you can go back to your boss using, the way the project management tools have built this up, you'd be able to say to the boss, well, I need this much in this quarter, this much in this quarter, this much in this quarter. And they might come back and say, no, I can only give you the money in this, in these injections. Well, then you need to maybe readjust the schedule to meet that or whatever it may be. Okay, so you're reconciling it at this point. If I move on, I start to think about then quality, and quality is, as I said, what is the quality standard that we're trying to achieve here, and how are we going to achieve it? Is there some organizational standard I need to achieve? Have the FDA dictated the standard? So I come up with a quality standard and work out how are we going to achieve it. So I'm trying to design quality into my product. Then I'm going to audit and make sure we're following the standard. It's all about process compliance. So whatever processes I laid out for the project team, make sure they follow them. And then, are we meeting the standard? And this is all about quality control and testing, etc. Very often, though, when you talk to a project team and you ask them about how are we going to ensure quality, they'll go, we're going to test it. But they're jumping straight to this here. They're just going, we're going to test it or we're going to inspect it. But quality is not something you can sprinkle on top of it at the end. We need to design it in. We need to put it into our processes. We need to have a quality system in place. We need to make sure we're adhering to it. And then when the product comes out right, we go, well, yeah, we had a plan. We came up with a plan. We followed the plan, and the plan worked. But this, again, is sometimes you would ask a company for what's the quality plan. And it surprises you. At times you go, well, oh, they go quality. Well, that's a given. And then they're surprised later on when we have defects in our product. So it's to get the project team thinking about how will we achieve quality. And sometimes people abdicate that responsibility. They go, oh, there's a person in quality, as if the person in quality is somehow only responsible for quality. But we got to make the whole project team aware of their contribution to the quality of the product. Now, resources, again, people, equipment, materials, where are they going to come from? What amounts do I need? When do I need them, etc.? What is the alternative? Again, virtual teams, can we use people from different time zones? Are there alternatives? So again, it's trying to work out when do I need them, what volumes, etc., what skill set. And again, as I said, the biggest challenge for most of your companies at the moment, given that we're in full employment, is this whole challenge around we have money, we have projects, but we do not have people. Okay, so it's a huge challenge, but at least by specifying them, we know what we have, what we haven't, what are the alternatives, how can we work around this, can we outsource some of it, what are the ways around this. Now, communication. Now, of all the modules that I deliver in the program, communication is, I think, the one area most of us can improve on. And the PMI would say that a good project manager spends up to 90% of their time communicating. So if you're a poor communicator, your career in project management will be short, right? Because you're constantly dealing with stakeholders, you're attending meetings, you're negotiating for resources, etc. But we encourage then, I suppose we're saying to people, stakeholders want to know what's happening on the project. They have power, they have interest, some of them have urgency. They want to know. So you got to let them know. I suppose that's what good communication is that ability to, create dashboards, etc., to provide the right format, right frequency to the right audience. And some people, over communicate and then stop. Some people under communicate and then the stakeholders are frustrated because they don't know. But there's one simple exercise here, and I just want us to take a minute because I'm encouraging you to communicate. Yet very often when we say something, we encode a message, but the person on the receiving side decodes it slightly differently. Now, in here, and I'll go through these very often with people, just to make them aware of their own communication. Now, the person on the right here, it's a very simple little exercise. The person on the right is saying something. The person on the left is hearing something different. And this can happen through verbal communication, or it could happen through written communication as well, is that you get an email from someone, they wrote it in a certain way, you decode it and take a different meaning from it. We call that concept noise. Now, I just want you to take one of these maybe, or maybe two of them. Say number 6 and number 7. I think what Pat is trying to say is, so what do you hear when someone says that to you? Okay? The other one is, I used to think that too. So when someone says that to you, what do you hear? So just take the two of those very quickly and go, I think what Pat is trying to say. So let's pretend you're inside the meeting and Pat says something. The boss then bounces in, or some other stakeholder bounces in, and they go, I think what Pat is trying to say here is, what does that mean? What do you hear? And the next one, I used to think that too. What is the person saying to you when you hear that? Now, again, I'm conscious of time, so I think what Pat is trying to say, when people hear that, they go, well, or if you're Pat, you're going, we're saying Pat can't put a sentence together or a coherent sentence together, so I'm taking it upon myself to speak for him. So I'm insulting Pat. But how could you be insulting everyone else in the room? You could be, everyone else in the room could be hearing, I've got a big brain, I can understand what Pat is saying, but you people over there do not. So you could be insulting everyone in the room by these comments. And again, you might maybe not have meant it, but somebody else heard it. And that's the challenge around projects, is that you have people involved. We get work done through people. And very often people, get upset, get defensive, get aggressive or whatever, because they maybe took an interpretation from something that was said. Number 7, I used to think that too. When someone says that to you, it's a bit like saying, you're stupid, I've moved on. I used to think it. I've been educated, you're obviously still over there. Now again, we say it, but maybe we don't mean it, but the other person hears it and takes meaning from it and gets upset by it. And that's why when we talk about project communications, we talk about, being careful about our language and talking about, that, cultural differences, that maybe a bit of emotional intelligence, a bit of political awareness, a bit of cultural awareness, etc., etc. Because everyone, has a different way of encoding messages, and maybe someone else decodes it differently. So again, we'll show you dashboards, etc., as a way to help you overcome these challenges. Risk, I said already, risk is, risks become issues. So very often you'd have, issues impacting budget, schedule, etc., etc. And you've got to think, if I've got lots of issues on my project, well, then I'm not doing a good job on project risk management. So again, risk management is a way to help us mitigate these risks before they start to happen. And again, I've noticed in a lot of companies, or again, as we travel with these programs, is that we need a way of scoring the risks. And you need to be very clear on, are people concerned about budget, schedule, reputational damage, business continuity, brand, whatever it may be. So then at least if you've got a good understanding of the types of risk that upset senior management or upset the stakeholders or their sponsors, you can make sure that you are on the same page as them. So if they're not concerned about schedule, well, then you sort those schedule risks out yourself. But if they are concerned about a risk that could cause reputational damage or brand damage or business continuity, well, then you would actually escalate that risk to them. So you're giving the project manager or the project engineer a tool set to go, how will you identify the risks? How will you score them to work out the vital few? And for those vital few, then what are you going to do about them? Are you going to avoid them? Are you going to transfer them? Are you going to mitigate the probability or the impact? Or is this above your pay grade? Should you actually tell the boss about this one? So again, you need the tool set, you need the language. And as you get into this, you start to think about things like residual risk, secondary risk, risk triggers, etc. What are the warning signs around these risks? How will I know that they're starting to turn against me? Very briefly, procurement. And many of your companies outsource more and more work. But those procurement, sometimes it's done as a risk mitigation or a transference of the risk. But doing it actually could bring about new risk. So again, you've got to be cognizant of what contract type we have. How would that drive a certain behavior of a particular stakeholder? And again, what scope are we giving them? What timeline have we given? What budget? So that piece of work you outsource is a project in itself for that outsourcing or service provider. But again, I can use that project management language then to manage that interface with that company. Stakeholder. Stakeholder is, as I said, anyone involved or impacted by the project. And it's unfortunate that, you know, in many of us in the companies, we talk about soft skills, you know, communication, stakeholder management. It's a terrible name in a way to have given something that's a really, really important skill, that ability to manage stakeholders. And here, all I'm saying is, look, stakeholders are people involved or impacted by the project. But the real full definition, as I said earlier, is people who perceive themselves to be involved or impacted by the project. And they can be the most dangerous, because sometimes you're thinking, that's got nothing to do with you, keep out of it. But maybe there was a better way of managing that stakeholder, because now you've made them even more militant and more resistant. So, and again, showing you tools and techniques about, you know, it could be anything from a salience model, showing you a Kubler-Ross change curve. You know, there's so many different ways to help the project manager understand the behavior of stakeholders when they resist a change. And then if you understand the behavior, well, then at least you can give the person tools and techniques and methods to deal with that resistance. And if you think about it, very often some of the biggest projects, as I said, we might have the money, we can define the scope, we can develop the schedule. But the biggest challenge often is to get stakeholders on board with you. And that's, again, the tool set from project management and from that stakeholder management module. It gives that person those tools and techniques. Now, one or two last thoughts here, as I'm trying to fit into an hour. People often are, you know, they're at different points in their career, and they want to know, you know, what should I be doing? Or, you know, what is, you know, they have so many questions about, you know, the different certifications, the different paths, and the different levels. But maybe this diagram here, I try and capture with you, you know, and it's a high level, you know, just to give you some idea. You have a lot of people in companies that might benefit from a basic understanding of project management. Now, this could be, you know, team members, junior project managers, etc. And even some of the grads in a lot of companies, when they get inducted, they take a simple module on project management so they can fit right into the organization. And then over time, again, people maybe go from some basic level of scoping and scheduling, etc., and they start to move up into the different certifications that are available. So you might cover something like scoping and schedule in a one-day course. You might cover scope, schedule, risk, and stakeholder on a two-day. But as you move up through it, there are different certifications and different ways of improving and, I suppose, developing those skills in project management. Some of them are certifications from the PMI, like the CAPM, which is the Certified Associate in Project Management. But maybe the most important one that we'd see a lot of is called the PMP, the Project Management Professional Certification from the PMI. Some companies, though, take what's called the QQI certificate, and I suppose this is a good way of getting knowledge into the company, where they take the course and then they have to work on a project related to work for a number of months. They fill out a scope, a schedule, a risk register, a status report, a change request, meeting minutes, a handover report, etc. So it ensures that people, what they learn in the classroom is transferred to industry. And that gets corrected by ourselves, and then QQI authenticated and give people the certs in project management. And as I said, underpinning it then is people do project management. Some people move on into program management, which is managing multiple projects at the same time. And that gets more into strategy, governance, benefits realization, senior stakeholder management, etc., etc. Underpinning some of this then is there's one-day courses, you know, specialist topics that some companies come to us for, or come to Grania for. They have trouble projects, and they'd like to know, what are the tool sets I need when we're in trouble? How do we recover one of those projects that maybe has gone off schedule, gone off budget? How would we audit it? How would we do a root cause analysis on it, etc.? And again, how would we set up a PMO? What benefits will it bring the organization? How would we charter that? How do we set out the roadmap for the services it will bring? How will we mature that PMO over time? And again, as I said, you can talk, if you want more details on these, I can share them with you. One thing here, just before we wrap up, the SkillNet under Grania's leadership has been very good at putting on public courses to develop the companies in her network. And again, Alison, you can talk to her as well on these. But very often a very practical course is that 2-day PM Essentials, where people come along to the class, and in class you explain scope, schedule, etc. to them, but they use their own projects. So you get them to show them scope, then they apply it to their own project. Show them scheduling, critical paths, they apply it. Show them risk, they come up with mitigations and contingencies, etc. And these are 2 programs that the SkillNet are putting on in your area over the next few months. So if you are interested, they're very heavily discounted by the SkillNet, and you're all members. So again, I think it's a great initiative by the network in your area to try and develop PM skills. Now, some companies will have the numbers, obviously, to run these types of courses internally, and that's great if you do, because you can talk privately about your own projects, etc. But if you don't, the public courses are a great way to get that knowledge and make sure it comes back to the business. The other thing we share with people, I suppose, at the end of all these courses is we give them a suite of project management templates, so in soft copy, and they can take them and deploy them directly to the business. The other thing we do is we give the management of whoever attended, we give them what's called the learning outcomes. So what behaviors in the attendee should you see over the following number of months, and call them out and say, hang on a second, you've been on this course, you should know how to scope, you should know how to prevent risks becoming issues, you should know the critical path. So again, some companies make sure they close that circle to make sure whatever the person was supposed to have learned, that they now start to demonstrate it in the actual workplace. Okay, now that's all I wanted to cover with you. As I said, it's a whistle-stop, very quick tour. Now I hope you found the hour beneficial and it's given you some insight into project management. Now, I'd often say to people after talking to them for an hour, I'd say you're in one of 3 buckets after listening to me for an hour. You're in bucket 1 is, God, this is great. We should have thought of this before. We should be doing project management. And that's great. I'm delighted if you think like that now, right? Bucket number 2 is project management is good. It can help us complement existing skills we have. I don't need the PMP, but I definitely need some of these basic skills, tools, techniques, etc. to get work done, so it can complement. Bucket number 3 is, if this is what project management is about, I want no further part in it. And I'm glad I only wasted an hour and not signed up for a 2-day course or something else. The problem with bucket number 3 is, unless you win the lotto, there's no avoiding projects and project management in your companies. It's all around us. And I'd often meet people maybe that left a company, joined a new company, and the first morning, the boss goes, I'm delighted you're here. I have a project for you. Okay. So there's no getting away from them anywhere as far as I can see at the moment. So look, I'll park it there for you. I'll just see if there's any questions, and if there is, I'll take them. But if somebody wants to send me a question or unmute themselves, I'll take the question now. And if not, you can feel free to follow up with me or Grania after the session. And as I said, I'm cognizant of time, and you're probably very busy in your roles as well. So I'll close the session now unless there are some specific questions from anybody here. Okay, so anybody have anything specific they want to ask? No? Okay, and I know a lot of people might have specific things they'd like to ask on their own side and maybe have private conversations about certain things. And if you didn't follow anything I said here today, as I said, you can feel free to get more contact details via Grania and contact me, and I'm happy to chat to you or visit you or whatever. But look, hopefully you found the hour beneficial. It's given you some insight, etc. I thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to listen, and hopefully you got some benefit from it as well. So I'll close there, and thank you very much for attending, and I wish you and your companies continued success. And thanks to Grania again for organizing everything. Thank you very much, guys. Bye-bye now.